The chamber of the Galactic Council stretched high into the darkness, a vast, domed expanse where the leaders of 100 alien civilizations sat in judgment. Columns of shifting light pulsed along the perimeter, a display of synthesized thought. Each pulse a silent decree, a wordless verdict handed down from the enlightened elite of the known galaxy. And today, humanity stood on trial. A human diplomat, Ambassador Patel, stood at the center of the chamber, her voice edged with frustration. "This is an abduction, not an evaluation," she said, fists clenched at her sides. "You took our children without consent. Humanity demands their immediate return." A ripple of disdain passed through the alien delegates. The Threxian High Chancellor, a serpentine creature with gleaming obsidian scales, tilted his elongated head. "Your protests are emotional as expected. The selection process is designed for the greater good. Do not mistake our patience for tolerance, Ambassador." On a raised dais, the Council's presiding figure, Archminister Vokral, a member of the intellectually dominant Kuvari, observed with thinly veiled condescension, "Humanity's inclusion in this program is a privilege. Your young will be tested, evaluated, and, should they prove of value, allowed to remain among the stars." His multifaceted eyes darkened. "Should they fail, they will be returned. To you. Damaged, perhaps, but that is the cost of knowledge." The room filled with murmurs of agreement. The Council had spoken. Humanity had no choice. Across the galaxy, on the fringes of Sol's territory, Major Ethan Graves received his orders. Ethan Graves had spent a lifetime hunting men. It had been a simple equation. His job was to find them, break them, and bring them back in a bag if necessary. He had tracked warlords through irradiated wastelands, dismantled insurgent networks, with nothing but a knife and a mind built for violence. But this mission was different. He was hunting aliens now. Seated inside the dimly lit command center of Earth's Covert Intelligence Division, Graves listened to the final details of the mission briefing. The air smelled of recycled oxygen, stale coffee, and cold metal. The director of operations, a man known only as Kavanaugh, leaned forward. "The Council took 43 children from Earth. They think we'll roll over. They think we'll play their game." Graves exhaled through his nose. "They're wrong." Kavanaugh nodded. "You get one shot at this. They're allowing a human representative, some diplomatic courtesy bullshit. You go in alone, play their game, and get close. Meanwhile, we'll be running silent ops to map their security structure, find the kids, get them out. Or, if you have to..." He met Graves's eyes. "Make damn sure they never take another one." Graves looked down at the dossier in his hands. It contained files on the Council members, the trial parameters, and the competitors. He skimmed through pages of xenobiology, tactical assessments, and cultural analysis. "This isn't a fair fight," Kavanaugh continued. "The others will. Have weapons, enhancements, you get a standard loadout, whatever we can smuggle in without violating intergalactic treaty laws." He scoffed. "They don't think you're a threat." Graves closed the file and smirked. "That's their first mistake." Beyond the spectacle of the Council's diplomatic facade, shadows stirred. In a hidden chamber beneath the Grand Convocation Hall, a Tsarlek operative spoke in hushed tones to an unseen figure through a secure transmission. The Tsarlek were not warriors in the traditional sense. They were manipulators, whisperers in the dark corridors of power. "The human is coming," the operative reported, his many-limbed frame coiled in anticipation. "We anticipated resistance, but their choice is unexpected." A distorted voice responded from the other end of the transmission. "We planned for diplomats, not killers." The Tsarlek hesitated. "Shall we alter the course of the challenge?" "No. Let it play out. The Council believes this is a test of potential, but we know the truth. The children are leverage." A pause. "If humanity survives the challenge, we will adjust accordingly." The Grand Arena stood as a testament to the might of the Galactic Council, an ancient construct carved from the bones of a long-dead Leviathan. From the stands, hundreds of alien species gathered to watch the spectacle unfold. a trial by ordeal, a brutal test designed to evaluate species worthiness, and at the center of it all stood Ethan Graves. He had arrived the night before, granted ceremonial lodging alongside the other contenders. The room was sterile, the air humming with the distant vibration of the arena's security grid. From his single window, he could see the training grounds where the competitors honed their skills. There were 9 other species competing, each one a marvel of biological evolution. The Zelkar, towering bipeds with reinforced bone plating, their strength unmatched. The Verthi, telepathic beings with the ability to invade minds and twist thoughts. The Skari, a species that had mastered biochemical warfare, excreting neurotoxins through their skin. And then there was him, a human, unenhanced, alone. He stepped forward into the arena. The announcer's voice boomed across the stadium. "Competitors, your trial begins now. Prove your species' worth or perish." "The alien," spectators jeered. A Verthi competitor slithered forward, its violet skin shifting like liquid. "Your kind is an anomaly," it said, its voice a whisper inside his head. "Weak. Simple. Why did they send you?" Graves locked eyes with the creature. "You'll find out soon enough." The first challenge was a test of endurance, an artificial environment designed to mimic the most extreme conditions in the known galaxy. The arena shifted in real time, morphing between landscapes, a volcanic wasteland, a crushing ocean abyss, an ice-ravaged tundra. Competitors had to adapt or die. Within minutes, the Zelkar tore through the ice plains, their brute strength carrying them forward. The Verthi drifted effortlessly over the terrain, unaffected by physical barriers. And Graves? He walked, deliberate. Calculated, he didn't rush. He studied. He cataloged movement patterns, noted weaknesses. The Zelkar, for all their power, struggled in the abyss. They were too heavy, their armor a hindrance. The Verthi were fast but wary of high-energy fields. The Skari were deadly but only at close range. The challenge lasted hours. By the time it ended, 4 competitors had fallen, not from direct combat but from attrition, miscalculation. Graves remained, unharmed, unshaken. The aliens were watching now. As the first trial ended, Graves stood at the arena's edge, looking up at the council's private viewing platform. Archminister Vokral's gaze met his, unreadable. A subtle tension filled the air. The humans weren't supposed to survive this long. Graves tilted his head, just slightly, then offered the smallest of smirks, a silent message. "I see you." The council had taken humanity's children. They thought they had the upper hand. They were wrong, and Ethan Graves had only just begun. The grand arena shifted beneath the feet of its contenders, the smooth floor splitting apart into tessellated plates that sank into the depths, revealing the battlefield below. A vast and treacherous expanse of alien biomes sprawled out, a seamless fusion of a dozen different Deathworld environments stitched together. From the scorching dunes of Carthos 9 to the razor-sharp ice spires of Valthun, the terrain itself was a predator, eager to cull the unworthy. A voice boomed through the arena, translated in 100 different languages simultaneously. The trial of ascendancy begins. Adapt, overcome, survive, prove your species worthy, or perish forgotten. A roar of anticipation erupted from the gathered alien spectators, a cacophony of clicks, growls, and screeches. The elite of the Galactic Council leaned forward in their observation chambers, ready to witness the inevitable humiliation of the human representative. Ethan Graves, standing among the towering alien warriors, rolled his shoulders and let out a slow breath. This was the part they didn't understand. They thought they were testing him. They had no idea he was testing them. The competitors spread out across the battlefield, each species moving with the confidence of their evolutionary advantages. The Zelkar, towering juggernauts with plated armor and regenerative limbs, moved with thunderous steps. The Verthi, insidious telepaths, slithered forward, their presence warping the air with psionic distortions. The Skari, multi-limbed predators with flesh laced with neurotoxins, scuttled through the landscape, their poison-laced appendages twitching in anticipation. And then there was Graves, human, unenhanced, alone. The laughter came almost immediately. The Zelkar warrior closest to him, nearly 9 feet tall and thick as a tank, turned its massive head toward the council's observation deck and let out a deep, reverberating laugh. "This is what the humans send," it rumbled. "A fragile-boned, sight-limited meat creature? How quickly will it break, I wonder?" More laughter rippled through the ranks. The Verthi speaker, a violet-skinned entity with no visible mouth, projected its thoughts across the battlefield. The humans should have sent a diplomat. It would have been a less painful death. Graves said nothing. He simply adjusted the worn strap of his gear harness and walked toward the center of the biome without a word. From the stands, the human observers, including Ambassador Patel, watched, with clenched fists. The arena's screens showed heat maps of the competitors' biosignatures, and Graves's was the only one that remained eerily calm. No spike in adrenaline, no fight-or-flight response, just observation. The first challenge arrived fast. The arena's shifting plates rumbled again, and a sudden hiss filled the air as the biome changed. From hidden vents, a caustic mist spread across the battlefield, an airborne agent that corroded flesh but was harmless to species with adaptive exoskeletons. The Zelkar stomped forward without hesitation, their thick, regenerating hide immune to the acid. The Verthi, beings of shifting biology, simply adapted, their skin darkening into a hardened, impermeable shell. Graves pulled his scarf over his nose and knelt, pressing his fingertips against the metallic ground beneath him. A moment later, he moved not away from the mist but into it. The alien audience gasped. Was he suicidal? But Graves had already noticed what the others hadn't. The arena had ventilation ducts, small intake grates that absorbed and redistributed the mist, a necessary safety measure. The Zelkar and the Skari charged forward, confident in their immunity. Graves didn't follow. Instead, he disappeared beneath the skeletal wreck of a fallen observation drone, pressing himself against the arena floor. In his hand, a small carbon fiber blade flicked open, almost invisible against the shifting light. One of the Vaerthi, slithering ahead with effortless grace, suddenly twitched, then convulsed, then collapsed, its hardened skin splitting apart. The alien crowd roared in confusion. It hadn't been attacked. It hadn't been touched. Graves remained crouched, watching. The Verthi had unknowingly stepped into one of the intake vents, where the mist was being recycled at increased concentration. Its biological ability to adapt had worked against it. Overcompensating, its cells had hardened too fast, too much, and shattered under their own pressure. Graves tilted his head, noted the pattern, and then he moved again. The next phase of the trial activated, a massive predatory construct, a biomechanical beast crafted from the remnants of a dead civilization, unfolded from the arena's edge. It was a monstrosity of steel, sinew, and synthetic muscle designed to eliminate the weakest. The Zelkar roared in excitement, a challenge worthy of their strength. The Skari spread out, already excreting their paralytic toxins in preparation for the kill. Graves? He simply walked. Slow. Calculated. The construct leapt into the fray, its reinforced claws shearing through alien flesh. The Verthi screamed in psychic agony as it was torn apart. The Skari, despite their numbers, realized too late that their neurotoxins had no effect on synthetic muscle. The Zelkar charged, hammering into the machine with raw brute force. And Graves watched. He let them fight first, let them expose the weaknesses. And then, when the construct took a step toward him, he moved for the first time with purpose, a blur of motion. A small silver disc flicked from his fingers, an electromagnetic disruptor, stolen off a fallen drone, when no one was looking. The construct staggered. It wasn't enough to disable it, but it was enough to make it turn, directly toward the Zelkar. The crowd gasped as the construct swung violently, catching the largest Zelkar warrior off guard. The alien's regenerative limbs twisted at the wrong angle, and with a sickening crack it collapsed, crushed under the very machine it had been trying to destroy. Silence. The towering juggernaut of the Zelkar lay motionless, its body twisted. Unnaturally, its chest caved in. The first true elite warrior had fallen. Graves never even touched it. The audience didn't know how to react. The announcer stammered, voice modulator flickering. The first contestant has fallen. Eliminated. The human, still standing, still watching, still waiting. From the council's observation deck, Archminister Vokral's many-faceted eyes narrowed. The human had done nothing, and yet he had outlived nearly half of the competition. This wasn't luck. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. Vokral turned to his advisors. Bring up all data on the human contestant. They complied, scrolling through everything they had gathered on Graves. And for the first time, Vokral felt something unsettling. Humans were not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most intelligent. But the data showed a horrifying trend. Humans won wars. And now, the council had invited a warfighter into their most sacred trial. A chill spread through the chamber. The game was no longer as simple as they thought, and in the arena, Graves simply dusted off his sleeve. Glancing up at the observation deck, he gave no words, but the message was clear. I see you, and I'm not done yet. The arena was no longer just a battlefield, it had become a graveyard. The once mighty Zelkar warrior, whose confidence had been unshakable, lay on the ground convulsing. His regenerative abilities had ceased, his once mighty body now betraying him. His massive hands clawed at his own chest, his breathing labored. His alien physiology should have ensured his survival against almost any threat. And yet his own biology was failing him. It hadn't been a lucky strike, nor an unseen wound. No external force had done this. Graves had poisoned him. Not today. Not even yesterday. Days ago. Long before the trial had begun, long before the Zelkar warrior had even considered Ethan Graves a threat, the human had seeded his downfall. In the shared meal hall, where warriors from across the galaxy gathered, before the competition, Graves had been nothing but a silent observer, eating sparingly, blending into the background. No one had considered that a species as physically weak as humans would attempt biological sabotage. But humans understood something these aliens didn't. War wasn't about power, it was about control. And control was something Ethan Graves had never surrendered. Another alien screamed. A Verthi psychic, one of the most formidable telepathic species in the galaxy, clutched its head, its translucent skin rippling in agony. The creature's large, pupilless eyes rolled back as it twitched violently. It had made the mistake of trying to read Graves's mind, to understand human thought. What it found inside was not what it expected. Not rationality. Not emotion. Not even fear. It found controlled chaos. A mind honed by war. A mind that never stopped hunting. It found memories of jungle warfare, where enemies were lured into kill zones before they even realized they were prey. It found urban sieges, where entire populations were turned into resistance fighters overnight, where the deadliest weapon wasn't firepower but ingenuity. It found a mind that thought in layers, where every move was 5 steps ahead, where every loss was calculated, where survival wasn't the goal, domination was. The psychic's body spasmed, its mind ripped apart by its own attempt to comprehend him. It collapsed to the ground, twitching. Another fallen competitor. And Graves? He hadn't even lifted a finger. The council's panic was palpable. Archminister Vokral, who had once watched this competition with amusement, was now on his feet, mandibles clicking anxiously. The humans should have been struggling. Instead, the most powerful warriors in the galaxy were falling apart. This isn't possible, a council member muttered, their elongated, gelatinous form quivering in distress. Vokral's multifaceted eyes darted toward his advisors. What do we have on this human? This Graves? Data scrolled across holographic screens, but the results only deepened the unease. The human had no formal political standing, no recorded high-rank military status. But there were gaps. Entire, Classified segments in the human records, sir, one of the analysts whispered. I think we were tricked. Vokral turned sharply. This wasn't about the trial. The realization hit them too late. Graves had never been playing their game. They had been playing his. Deep within the facility's core, alarms blared. Security officers, once relaxed, now sprinted through corridors in chaos. Containment fields flickered. Lockdowns failed. A single human was never meant to breach a Galactic Council stronghold. And yet, he had. While the Council had been watching the games, Graves had mapped out security grids. While they had been mocking him, he had been intercepting their communications. While they had celebrated his expected failure, he had been systematically dismantling their infrastructure from within. By the time they realized what was happening, the facility's network had already been compromised, and in a sealed chamber where rows of human children were being kept under the guise of observation, their containment cells powered down one by one. The guards stationed there turned, weapons raised, and saw Graves standing in the doorway. The children didn't cheer, didn't cry. They simply watched. Because they understood something these aliens didn't. A human didn't come this far without a plan, and Ethan Graves never left his own behind. Back in the council chamber, the feed from the containment facility flashed on the main screen. The entire galactic network was watching now. It wasn't just an arena event anymore. This was a hostile takeover. Graves stood in the center of the chamber, flanked by the freed human children, his eyes cold and unwavering. His voice, when it came, was calm. You took something from us, he said. Now I'm taking something from you. He lifted a small hollow emitter, casually tapping the side. And the real secret unfolded. The council froze. It wasn't just a rescue, it was an expose. Across every broadcast station, every data network, the hidden council transmissions played for all to see. Secret recordings, conversations, plans to use the human children as leverage. The Galactic Council had never intended for Earth to become an equal. They had intended to break it. They had feared human unpredictability. They had feared the very nature that had now outplayed them. And now, the galaxy knew chaos erupted. The Council fractured in real time, members turning on each other. Some species had no idea about this secret operation. Now they were furious at the deception. Others had been complicit, but were now desperate. To cover their tracks, the entire political structure of the Galactic Council was falling apart at the seams, and Graves, he simply stood there, watching, waiting. And when Vokral finally snapped and shouted, "You think this changes anything? You are still one human." Graves did something no one expected. He smiled and said, "No, I'm just the first." Transmission ended. Alarms shrieked. Red lights strobed violently across the vast corridors of the Galactic Council's facility. The once impenetrable stronghold was now in chaos, the very foundation of alien order crumbling in real time. And in the middle of it all, Major Ethan Graves moved like a ghost. The human children clung to one another, watching him with wide, unblinking eyes. Some were too young to understand what was happening. Others, those old enough to know fear, stayed silent, trusting the man who had come for them. Graves knelt before them, his expression calm despite the raging storm around them. "We're walking out of here," he said, his voice steady. "But you have to do exactly as I say. No hesitation, no noise, no fear." They nodded, some trembling, but resolute nonetheless. Graves straightened, scanning the corridor ahead. He had no backup, no support. Just himself, a handful of stolen alien weapons, and a lifetime of experience making the impossible happen. It would be enough. It had to be. The lockdown engages. Thick, reinforced blast doors slammed down at the far end of the corridor, sealing off exits. Automated defense turrets whirred to life, their sleek barrels scanning for movement. A heavily armored Dravok enforcer stomped forward, its exosuit gleaming under the flashing alarms. The creature's 4 muscular arms flexed as it hefted, a massive plasma cannon. Human, It snarled, its voice a low guttural growl. Surrender. Now. Graves exhaled slowly. No sudden movements. No wasted energy. Then, in an instant, he moved. A flick of his wrist sent a stolen alien shock, grenade rolling across the floor. The Dravok's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. Boom! Electricity exploded outward, short-circuiting the defense turrets and overloading the Enforcer's suit systems. The massive creature staggered, its cannon falling limp in its hands. Graves was already there. 1 step, 2, 3. He launched himself into the air, twisting mid-motion. The dagger he had hidden in his boot flashed in the dim light. With surgical precision, he drove it into the creature's throat. Choked gurgle, a spray of dark blood. The Dravok collapsed. The children didn't flinch. They simply watched, absorbing what it meant to be human in a galaxy that thought them weak. The ultimate face-off. Graves barely had time to turn before a deep, guttural snarl echoed through the corridor. He already knew who it was. The Zelkar, warrior. The same one he had poisoned, the one who should have been dead, but the massive 9-foot-tall brute still stood, its regenerative abilities kicking in just enough to keep it on its feet. You think you are cunning, human? The warrior rasped, its entire body trembling with fury. You are nothing but an insect who forgot its place. Graves rolled his shoulders, his grip tightening around his stolen alien pulse rifle. Funny, he said, stepping forward. I was just about to say the same thing about you. The battle erupted. The Zelkar lunged, its 4-clawed arms moving like a whirlwind. Graves twisted, narrowly avoiding a swipe that would have torn him in half. Speed. That was the key. The alien was strong. Unbelievably so. But it wasn't invincible. Graves ducked under a strike, then pivoted into the warrior's blind spot. His fingers found the weak point he had studied earlier. A cluster of nerve receptors at the base of its spine. With a brutal jab, he slammed a repurposed alien injector into the spot. A half-second delay. Then the Zelkar howled in agony, its body convulsing. Its own adrenaline-enhancing combat serum, now overdosed. It was a chemical time bomb, designed for brief bursts of invincibility. Too much, and it became lethal. The massive creature staggered, its limbs seizing. Its body was shutting down. Graves tilted his head, watching as realization dawned in the alien's dimming eyes. Then, in a voice as cold as death itself, he muttered, "Game over." One final shot, point blank to the skull. The Zelkar collapsed, its lifeless body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. Graves stepped over it without hesitation. Last-minute desperation. As he moved toward the final exit, a voice echoed through the facility's intercom system. Vokral. The council leader's tone was different now. No longer mocking. No longer arrogant. It was desperate. Human. Wait. Graves kept walking. Name your price, Vokral pleaded. We can make you powerful. Give you wealth beyond your imagination. You don't have to do this. Graves stopped. The children watched him, waiting. Then, without turning around, he simply said, "I'm not here for deals." His hand tightened on the detonator he had wired into the main control hub. "I'm here for my kids." Click. The explosions ripped through the facility. The council's defensive systems went dark, and Ethan Graves, he was already gone. The escape. The stolen alien dropship rocketed through the upper atmosphere, its hull rattling from incoming fire. "Hold on," Graves barked, his hands deftly maneuvering the controls of the unfamiliar craft. The children braced as the ship banked hard, narrowly avoiding a pursuing squad of council interceptors. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and yet they had already won, because the council was too busy tearing itself apart to stop them. Their secrets had been exposed, their leadership was fractured, and the galaxy was watching. Humanity's final victory. As the ship broke free of the planetary blockade, Graves allowed himself a single slow breath. They had made it. The children, once terrified prisoners, now sat huddled together, safe. But it wasn't over yet. He reached for the communications panel, opening a channel to the Galactic Council's network. The aliens needed to hear this. His face appeared on every screen in the system, his voice, cold and sharp as steel. "You took our children," he said, his words deliberate. "You thought we were prey." He let the silence hang for just a second longer. Then, with a smirk, he finished. "You forgot. We're the apex predators." Transmission ended. The Galactic Council lay in ruins, its chambers once filled with arrogance and certainty now drowned in whispers of fear. The revelation of their corruption had shattered their iron grip, leaving their power fractured. Some species demanded justice. Others scrambled to distance themselves from the scandal. But one truth had become undeniable. Humanity was no longer a joke. Across the stars, the narrative had changed. The race once dismissed as primitive, emotional, insignificant, had just outmaneuvered the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. The same council that had stolen their children now feared their retaliation. Back on Earth, the abducted children were home. Families wept, clutching them tightly, never to let go again. News channels broadcast their return, hailing the operation as an unprecedented victory. But of Major Ethan Graves, there was no sign, no speeches, no public recognition, no trace. Some believed he had disappeared back into the shadows, returning to whatever secretive world had shaped him into the weapon that had toppled an empire. Others whispered that he had been watching all along, ensuring the message was clear. Don't come for us again. In the cold halls of the Council's remains, alien leaders sat in unsettling silence. Humanity had no fleets, no galactic influence, no grand war machines, and yet a single human had undone them. For the first time, an unspoken terror settled into their bones. They had underestimated Earth. They would never make that mistake again.